Hey guys, welcome to the Adventure Photo Show. My name is Steve Richert. I'm a photographer and filmmaker, documentary and adventure stuff mostly, and I am a lover of most things Fuji. I want to welcome you guys to this live stream and to this channel where I do the Adventure Photo Show, which is all about having fun, getting out with the camera. And sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulty. Just tried this live stream a couple of minutes ago, but tonight what I want to do is just a quick live stream to share a little bit with you, just kind of update you what I've been doing with the Fuji X-E3 as I've been testing it out. I'll take some questions, but the main thing that I really wanted to explore right now is the idea of using pancake lenses with the Fuji X-E3, because it has become really clear to me that this camera. Hello, Randy. Good evening from Malaysia. Brian, I saw you checking in as well. Everybody else that's in here, glad to have you guys here. I know a lot of you guys may be new too, which is cool because the X-E3 has gotten a little bit of boosted up some of the new folks here on the channel, which is really exciting. Glad to have you guys here. But this is a super powerful little camera, and as a combination it's with the 23mm lens, which is really fantastic. But it's gotten me thinking about the one thing that has always caused me to waffle and shift away from the interchangeable lens systems on the Fuji cameras, and that is really the portability and the size of this package. And the camera body, I don't really think could be reasonably, anyways, could be much smaller. But the area where there is still, I think, some work that can be done, or some improvement perhaps, is on the lens and kind of making a smaller lens. Now, the lens that I'm holding in the thumbnail and right here, this is an Industar 50mm M42 screw mount lens, which is a fantastic little lens, and it is one of the smallest lenses that, well, it's the smallest lens that I've ever seen personally. That's a little Russian 50mm lens, and this is for the M42 screw-on mount. And the problem is, if I could mount this directly on the Fuji X-E3, this would be fantastic, but the adapter that is required, the speed booster, is pretty large, and so when you put it all together, this is actually a little bit on the large side. And I realized of late, and this is about the same size as the 23, which is not a huge combination, but that difference in the size is the difference between jacket pocket versus carrying it around your neck, or having to carry it a little bit more outwardly. And that was one of the things that pushed me away from the X-T2 and pushed me towards the X100F, is that you look at the profile on this, it's very small, it's pancake wise, and easily goes in a jacket pocket. Now, I've gotten some good-natured jesting from some of you guys commenting, saying, well, you should have just gotten a bigger jacket, because that's ultimately less expensive than buying into and out of a new system. And I think there's some truth to that. Although I am at this point really excited to have the X-E3, and even in comparison with the X-T2, I think everything that I know about this camera is, again, a lot of that is based on my personal use, my preferences, and my needs, to say that I'm glad that I wound up with this camera over the X-T2 for a variety of reasons that I'll go into in greater detail as I start cooking up some of my reviews. But one of the things I realized is that I have avoided using the Fuji pancake lenses, and I don't really have a great reason for having avoided them, because one of the things that I love about Fuji cameras is that they're small and portable. And so the 18mm f2 and the 27mm f2.8, I believe, are both lenses that, are not perfect. They have their trade-offs, but they are both very small. And the ability to shoot a wide angle that is admittedly at a focal length that I don't love. I don't love the 27mm equivalent focal length, which is what the iPhone uses. It's kind of like, it's in between. It's like wide, but not really wide, but still wide enough. And the 27, which is about a 41mm equivalent, is, again, it's a little bit tighter than 35, but not quite tight as a 50, and so they're weird focal lengths. Now, I'm not certain. I know that I believe that those two pancake lenses, the 27 and the 18, were some of the first lenses introduced by Fuji when they came out with the X series. And so they seem like kind of weird focal lengths for them to land on, and I have always looked down my nose at those lenses because of the fact that there are trade-offs. And one of the things that I've realized for a while, but it's really coming home in my mind is the realization that that there are always going to be trade-offs, and that there's a certain point at which it's good to embrace the trade-offs because what you get is really worth it. And so being able to have a camera that can do everything that the X-T2 does, or at least in terms of what I needed it to do, can't do everything exactly the same, but in terms of the things that I really relied on, this camera, the X-E3, does all of those things. And to be able to have that in a smaller package, smaller body, and with a pancake lens, that's something that I think that I need to suck up my desire to have the perfect corner-to-corner sharpness and have everything at the focal lengths that I'm most comfortable at, to try that. And so that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing here over the coming weeks. But what I'm trying to do right now is trying to determine if I want to get the 27 or the 18, or potentially get both of them and just, you know, have a very portable package. Because at the end of the day, we all want to have a super portable, super compact, but not so tiny that it's hard to use system that is cheap, that performs very, very well, and that is weatherproof, but also really versatile. And we want all these conflicting disparities to line up in our favor, and that doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out that way, but that is my plan, to start looking at some of the pancake lenses, test those. And I would love to hear from you guys if any of you have any experience with these lenses on other systems. And I know there's some issues with the focusing, at least on the 18, from what I've heard, not being super fast and being a little bit noisy. You know, being a little bit soft on the edges as well, the 18 again specifically. But I think that ultimately that's a trade-off that might make sense, that might be worth using, just to be able to have that overall benefit of the portability, especially since you can still have it's not like you're locked into that lens, but to be able to have, when you need portability, to be able to have portability, and both portability with a tighter lens like a 27 that shoots at 40 millimeters and change, and also a wider lens that shoots a little bit closer to 30, to kind of give you a little bit of variety with maximum portability. You know, I think that's kind of the direction that I'm going, and I hope that Fuji decide to kind of make more of these lenses, and I don't know that they're going to. I have no reason to suspect that they are or that they will, but to give us more pancake options for these cameras, because I think that more and more the thing that really attracts a lot of people into these systems, and specifically something this tiny, is the fact that you can have that amount of portability. And I know that it's nitpicky, and a lot of the stuff that I dig into in my reviews, it is a little bit nitpicky, because I like to look for those details of things that you know, aren't so obvious about the things that could be better. But the difference between jacket pocket versus, you know, having to carry around your neck, it's a pretty significant difference in a lot of cases, and I think that could be really help things a lot, at least in terms of my use. Now, hopefully that trickles down to Fuji, and they will be responsive, as this channel is growing rapidly. We actually just passed 6,000 subscribers last night, and yeah, it's pretty exciting, and I'm thankful to have all of you guys and gals here. Good evening, Tiff. Glad you're able to make it. Let me see what I got here a little bit. Some comments, questions. Brian asks how the vintage lenses are with the X-E3 so far. Vintage lenses, as you may or may not know, are a big passion of mine. I actually kind of discovered that after getting rid of the X-T2. I picked up an X Pro 1 just for like $200, just to have something to kind of kick around with. And I got, you know, started getting into the vintage glass, and turns out that especially on the telephoto end, it's possible to just get a huge array of beautiful, beautiful lenses that are fantastic. But with the X Pro 1, and ultimately one of the reasons why I'm migrating back to the XE3 is because the manual focus assist and the focus peaking are so much more advanced on the XE3 than they are on the X Pro 1. And I can tell you just from the little bit that I've done, yes, it was $200 for the X Pro. It was a little bit beat up. It was a little bit beat up. Still works. I have it. If you want to buy it from me, hit me up offline. I don't know if that is going to get this video demonetized, but my thought is that the XE3 would certainly replace that X Pro 1. I can tell you that the XE3 with these old vintage lenses, like, you can find focus very, very easily. And one of the things that I like about these about the XE3 is being able to double tap on the screen as you're holding it. So I can show you with the 23. But as you're trying to find focus, you can double tap and it zooms in. And I mean, that's not a game-changing feature in of itself, right? Because that's something that all the Panasonic cameras have been doing forever. But to see that on a Fuji camera is super exciting. And you can also access that same thing. Let me take the lens off, right? By swiping down. So when you swipe down, it's like without really having to change up your positioning, you can be looking and you just swipe down and it gives you a punched in view where you can see, and then as soon as you hit that, half press the shutter button, it goes to the, zooms back out of the manual focus assist, and it's very clear, very sharp. And the focus peaking is still not quite as good, I would say, as the Panasonic GH5, but it is a hell of a lot better than it was on the X Pro 1 anyways. And I would say it's about right up there with the XT2, only the touch functionality is really, really handy, really superb. And I got to play with that a little bit more, and I'm very excited about this camera, as you may or may not be able to tell. And I'm also, frankly, I'll be honest and say I'm excited to have you guys excited about this camera, because that gives me motivation and energy to look into stuff. But I also want to be thorough in the research that I'm doing and the use that I'm doing. So I'm doing these live videos to update, but then I'm going to go back and kind of synthesize things into a couple of reviews. And what I want to do is share with you the review videos that I want to actually edit together, so that you know what I'm cooking up. And if you have questions, comments, or suggestions that don't necessarily fall into one of those videos, maybe let me know, so that I know, okay, here's a different video that I could do. One of the videos that I definitely want to do is just with the XE3 for video. How does it work for video? How does the mobile app with the phone work as a monitor? What's the autofocus like? What's the difference between the full HD and the 4K? What does the audio sound like, even though it has that terrible little 2.5mm jack, which is just super irritating? That's definitely one video that I want to do, and I will probably do that video sooner than later, because of the fact that right now I can't edit the raw files out of the XE3 in Lightroom. I want to do a comparison video with the X100F and rough comparison with the XT2 as well, and maybe XT20, kind of lump in a little bit of discussion of the XE3 compared to some of the other Fuji cameras that I have worked with. I also want to do one that is just a comprehensive review to say this is kind of basically the pros and cons, what I like, what I didn't like. And I think that's the majority of what I'm looking at this point, to do those videos. And then the one other video that I wanted to also do was to kind of compare this with lenses and say, kind of look at the best lenses that fit the best on this ergonomically and from a handling standpoint, because I had some people comment and point out the fact that I was one of the few people, or the only person, at least at what they said, that put a 16mm lens on here. And I want to just try this camera, because it's so tiny, to help give people a little bit of an idea. This is how the XE3 is a tiny little camera. This is how it does with a larger lens, because a camera this powerful, even though it's small, if you shoot with, I think this is going to appeal to experienced photographers who are going to have bigger vintage lenses and who might want to say, like, okay, yeah, it's powerful and it's got all this good stuff in a small package, but is it too small for the lenses that I want to work with? And I want to kind of take a look at lenses specifically with the size and the handling matching with a body this tiny. And so those are the videos. I think it's four videos that I outlined there. If you guys have questions, comments, drop them below, drop them in the chat. Let me know, because you know, all of the feedback and the questions and stuff, that helps me structure what I'm going to be doing from this point moving forward. And I'm going to try to start getting some of those out hopefully by next week, so that we have, you know, for the whole Black Friday madness, that we're starting to get some of that stuff out. And depending on what happens with the pancake lenses, whether I get the 18 or the 27, maybe both, I may do a video specifically about just kind of what sort of performance one can expect out of the 18 and the 27, because I think that a lot of people overlook those lenses because of the fact that they're, you know, they're definitely not the apex of the Fuji quality, but they are good enough. I think this is my suspicion, and I want to test this out and find out. I believe that that the benefit and the trade-off of having that small size is worth a little bit in terms of the image quality, because at the end of the day, unless you're pixel peeping, I don't think that it's going to be super noticeable, but we will have to see. Okay. Thomas Slav says 18mm is one of 3 lenses in the first bunch, and the 35. Okay, so the 18 was one of the first ones, but the 27 is later. And I know Ken, Angry Photographer, he like is in love with the 27 and says it's one of the most underrated lenses. So I would really like to put that to the test. And I think that, again, and a lot of you may not agree with this, but a lot of times a lens, just like a camera, is not a standalone item that either is good or bad. It is the combination of how it fits into what it is that you need to accomplish. And there are some situations where one camera, one lens might be a little bit better, but you know, specifically in a, you know, depending on in a professional situation or setting, having a camera that's much smaller but that leaves you without the dual card slots of the weather sealing of the X-T2, the smaller camera that has fewer professional features might enable you to do better in a professional situation, depending on what you're shooting and how. And I think that the same thing goes for lenses, that the end-all be-all is not what it looks like 100% zoomed in on Lightroom. I think that a lot of it is more holistic than that, without trying to be too touchy-feely. That's my suspicion, and I'd like to kind of do a little research, as it were. Scott's Wild Camper says, Eddie says, I've said no new tents, and I always sell one that's perfectly good and I get another one. That is the story of my camera woes. And the next lens for Eddie is a Sigma 16mm 1.4. I don't know anything about Sigma 1.4 16mm, but I do know the Fuji 16mm lens is the one lens that I could not bear to sell when I got rid of the X-T2. I kept that, which is why I got the X Pro 1, because I needed to have something to use on the 16mm. And then, of course, then that kind of sucked me back into thinking about the X-E3, and now here we are with, you know, going back through the whole camera purchasing and debating and reviewing that whole scenario again. But I have to say, I am not sorry that I have taken this step with the X-E3, because so far it's blown my mind. And yeah, those of you who are interested in the X Pro 1, you know, shoot me a message or whatnot offline, and we can talk about that. And I may even wind up at some point, once I've had a chance to test the X100F against the X-E3, there's a possibility that I may be letting the 100F and the teleconverter let that go, and I would much rather let that go to somebody here who's going to love it the way that I do. At least ostensibly so, right? Eddie says, trying some manual settings now. Aperture priority seems best for me. Yes, aperture priority is what I first started using when I started kind of going more towards, you know, shooting all full manual, because I think the aperture, and you can try the shutter priority too. It's really good for that. It's really good for that as well. Okay, let's see. Tiff says, I just got the Canon EF S 24 2.8. Looking forward to seeing how it works for video on the Canon. It's a macro lens too. That's awesome. I hope to use it on the Fuji 2. Should have said that that 24 is a pancake lens, and that is exactly what I would love to see. If Fuji could make a wide, even if it's not super fast, and I think this might have something to do with maybe their hesitancy, because I feel like, not necessarily that it's a bad thing, but I think Fuji are perfectionists on some level, and that's partly why we love their stuff, because they don't put out crap that has to be, you know, reeled back in and retooled, and they don't have to, you know, put out new camera bodies every 6 months or whatever because they didn't get it right in the previous iteration. But I think there's still some room for them to make lenses that maybe aren't as focused on being the apex of speed and sharpness, but that are more usable, like a you know, like a wide 24 millimeter focal length lens, or something, even, again, like I said, like what they have on the 100F, and, you know, a little f2.35 equivalent pancake, and kind of start working on the pancake stuff. And even if that means that you give up maybe a stop in terms of the aperture and it's a little bit slower, I would feel totally fine with that, just because of the fact that I know their cameras handle noise really well. So you know, for those of us who don't need like the absolute maximum bokeh in every shot, the portability would be an amazing benefit to have, and I wish that we could get that. But in the meantime, I will continue to use the I will continue to love and use my vintage lenses, and I look forward, Tiff, to seeing what you make with that Canon lens on your X-T2. That should be awesome. Thomas Love says Samyang Rokinon 12mm f2 shouldn't be too big for the X-E3. Agreed that it should not be too big, and my issue at this point isn't like that it's too big or that it's imbalanced, because frankly, even when I put the 16mm on here, it didn't feel really bad, as long as I have the thumb grip on here. And the thumb grip, I got into kind of an argument with some guy in one of the comments who said that the thumb grip is like terrible on here. The thumb grip here, you can see it is a little bit in, like, it impacts your ability to move the to change the shutter speed, right? But it's not like the end of the world, because you can still get in there, because the issue that I had on the 100F was that the same thumb grip was getting in the way, but it wasn't changing the shutter speed that I had the problem with. It was changing the ISO, which is also on this same ring for the 100F. And all that to say, the thumb grip is really useful on this when you have a bigger lens. It changes the way that the grip holds, and the 16mm balances really well, even though it's significantly bigger, because the grip here is quite positive. It feels really, really good to hold, and this little thumb catch helps a whole bunch with a bigger lens. My issue is that I want to go beyond just how comfortable is it to hold in my hand when I'm shooting, and get it down to a size that I can stuff it in my pocket and go, because that would, having a pancake lens on the X-E3 would take the portability and the versatility of the Fuji X series into a completely different realm, I believe, than where we have seen it so far. And like the X100 series has gone really close there, but it doesn't give you quite the versatility, although it makes up for a lot of the versatility with the built-in ND filter. But I think one of the reasons why people love the X100 series is because it does have that versatility where you can stuff it in a pocket and you can go. And if they bring that to the interchangeable lenses as well, I think it would be really, really fantastic, and that would be something that, for me personally, I would be way, way into. Brian says, hey, I'd take the X100F, hee. Well, we can talk about that, Brian. I'm assuming you're not thinking of like a freebie. We could probably talk about that offline a little bit too. Hung like Tic Tacs, good to see you here, brother. What did you eat for breakfast, dinner, and lunch? For breakfast, coffee with butter, a little bit of roast beef, and then nothing until like a half hour ago. I had a 3-egg omelet and a little bit of cheese, a little bit of liverwurst, and what else did I have? couple pieces of bacon, and it was delicious. Yes, my ketogenic diet, that's how I'm celebrating World Diabetes Day, which today actually is World Diabetes Day. And after I get off here, this live stream with you guys, I got to go record narration for a documentary that I'm going to have hopefully out pretty soon. Short documentary piece about access to insulin that I've been working on behind the scenes, doing a little, hopefully some advocacy to bring awareness to how much it sucks to have your life rely on medication that was invented in 1921. The original patent was sold for $1, and today it costs $1,000 a month. Not cool, but that's what the documentary is more or less about. Tic Tac says, what if you were on a 5-second timer? What would your answer be? The best focal length lens to use for everyday use? 23mm f2 lens would be the best focal length for everything. 5 seconds. Yes, there you go. I appreciate you putting the timer in there because that helped me discipline myself a little bit more with that. Oh, video specifically. Oh, well, now you tell me video. Video, I would say 24mm equivalent, so 16 on the Fuji, but if you're on a Panasonic or Micro Four Thirds, I would say 24mm because, yeah, I always feel like you can get closer with video. I mean, well, this is really the answer in a lot of ways is the same for both, and I'm just going to throw your 5-second timer out the window. I think that for me personally, I always have liked the idea of getting physically closer and getting more involved in the action of what I am shooting or filming. And so I would always prefer to have a lens that is wider than one that is too tight and kind of get in a corner where I can't go back any further. So I would say for stills, I would say a 35mm equivalent. For video, I would say a 24mm equivalent. That's just my unenlightened, brutish perspective. Tiff asks, you saw the Rokinon 12 on my Sony 3N in that photo, and I think it's smaller than the XE3, if not similar. Didn't feel awkward at all. Yeah, that looked awesome. I was looking at that Rokinon lens. That thing looks amazing. The only problem is that I'm trying to limit myself now and trying to match the XE3 with stills lenses rather than cine lenses, although at some point I may, honestly, a lot of it depends on what I find when I test the video capabilities of the XE3, because I have to tell you, I did a little bit of testing with and I might even be able to, I don't know if it's going to translate, how well it's going to translate here on the live stream, but let's see. We are shooting in video mode. And yeah, I can't really tell if you can see how quickly it like adjusts the focus, the autofocus, but I was really impressed by how sharp and how responsive and how quick the autofocus was in video mode. And so I have a feeling that this camera might be kind of it might surprise some of us with its ability to perform as a video camera as well. The thing is that it is not going to ever be, and I think this is one of the things that I learned with the XT2, is that this camera is, I think, going to be able to do really good with video, really good with stills. It's just not going to ever have the ability to cross over in the same scenario and be like, I'm going to shoot stills for a little bit, then I'm going to shoot video for a little bit. It's not going to cross over seamlessly like the Panasonic cameras do. So, hey, QAnon, good to see you here. Yeah, I got a beard, I got a lot of hair. I'm a hairy guy. It's all the folic acid that I eat. Maybe, I don't know. I'm follically blessed, let's just say. Eddie says the best camera and lens is the one that you always take. That is true, and I have to say I wanted to not really like this camera and just kind of be like, it's not that great, I'm going to send it back. But this camera it has started to really grow on me, and it has so much of what I love about the X100F and so much of what I love about the Fuji X-T2 that it's kind of like it's going to be hard to envision myself letting this go in favor of the 100F. In a perfect world, I would keep both of them, and who knows, we might have a perfect world and I might keep both of them. That would be awesome, but we gotta wait and see. John T asked, what was my first camera? Also, when did I start in photography? Good evening, John. Thank you for that question. My first camera was a Nikon D5100. No, I'm sorry, a D60, even before the 5100, with a little kit lens. I didn't know anything about photography, and I started, this was in like 2008, I think is when I got the D60. And I got it because I spent a lot of time traveling on the road climbing and just driving around the country, and what would happen is my wife was always taking pictures. She had a little Canon, I think it was a G12 it was called. It was a good camera, I mean, relatively speaking, shot raw, and I think it was like a 12 megapixel or 8 megapixel sensor, shot raw, and it was, you know, it was still above both of our pay grade. But she would always, and I was blogging, I was the writer, I would write about what we were doing, and this was like before Living Vertical ever started. I just started a little blog because I thought I was a writer, which I suppose I am somewhat of a writer if I put my mind to it, but I wanted to share my adventures and my stories with people back home and friends, and so it was just kind of like this informal thing where my wife and I would go live on the road for 6-8 months at a time, and then we would kind of write about what we were doing, post pictures, then we would come back, we would work for 5 or 6 months, pay off our debts, get 0% interest credit cards, hit the road for another 6 months, and come back and pay off the, you know, and we would cycle through doing that. And after doing that a couple of times, I realized that, you know, when I wasn't climbing, I was getting bored and I didn't have anything to do on my rest days, really, especially if I didn't have internet to go write on my blog. So, and also my wife was always kind of taking these pictures that made me feel like, hey, I wish I could do that. Like, they were really good, because she didn't really try, but she just had a better eye than I did naturally. She was just good at taking pictures. And, you know, we started talking about that, and she would take pictures and I would post them on the blog with my writing, and that kind of got me interested in doing more of it. And then in 2011, I decided to make a documentary project about climbing with type 1 diabetes, which I had had at that point for like 12, 13 years, and how kind of diabetes kind of taught me to look at challenge and adversity differently in my life, and got me to embrace adventure. And I made a documentary out of that, and that kind of took off. That's where Living Vertical was started, hence the name, because it all came from climbing and that kind of intersection between climbing, art, and diabetes. So that kind of three-pronged attack of who I typically am in public, that all came together, and I found that the photography and the creative part of things, including the video, which I had never done before then, I was finding that it all really kind of worked together to improve my life, my ability to cope with things, my ability to climb and stay psyched on climbing. When I wasn't having a good day climbing, I could always take my camera and find some good light and get a good picture and capture something beautiful out of that. And that's kind of what inspired me. It was always very much of a hands-on practical thing and or documentary type of thing, where it's like, I'm going here, I'm doing this thing for a reason, I want to have something. I mean, glorified snapshots. And to tell you the truth, that's what it has always been for me. Like, I look at the work of some other people that find amazing light and do these really elaborate, amazing things, and when I look at their pictures, I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And to me, that's super impressive. Somebody takes a picture and you can't tell what it is, but you want to keep looking at it. I think that's a big win, creatively speaking. And I'm not that kind of photographer. For me, honestly, a lot of what I do, it's glorified snapshots, but those snapshots, when you go to extreme lengths to get those snapshots, or when they're extremely precious moments, the fact that they're snapshots does not devalue them. If anything, it makes them more valuable. So the real effort that I put into photography, aside from buying gear and talking about gear, because I love cameras as well as photography, the real effort that I try to put into my work as I envision it is going places and doing hard things, where the photography itself may not be anything particularly remarkable from a photographic standpoint, other than the fact that it documents the fact that I was there and that I did this thing that is remarkable of its own sake. And maybe that's an artistic cop-out to kind of look at things that way, but that's the way that I look at it typically. But right now, being in a position where I can't go climbing and I can't do all the rad adventures that I would like to do, it has forced me to now kind of take a slightly different approach and say, okay, how can I actually do better creative stuff? And that's why we started the Living Vertical Photo Challenge, which on Twitter, on Instagram, LV Photo Challenge is the hashtag. And I haven't been paying a whole bunch of attention to that, but been using that as an exercise to work with everybody here in this community, where we're sharing our photos and we're kind of taking on different challenges. And the most it's kind of like a secret live stream photo challenge type of club, because it's all the people that are on the live streams that participate. And that's what we've been doing recently. So it's been a very interesting journey that I've gone on with cameras and because of cameras, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about talking about cameras, is because getting excited about a stupid piece of plastic and glass that costs too much money that you're not going to be happy with for long enough, that could change your life. That could change somebody else's life. I mean, I never thought that I would be doing this ever. I never thought that I would make a documentary about climbing and diabetes, and that when I did decide to do that, I never thought that anybody would care about it. And I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of emails and letters from people who who've taken value out of it and say that that's changed their life in some way or changed the way that they think about things. And again, never thought that that could happen, but a little bit of plastic and glass and metal, it can do some amazing things when we kind of let it do that, So I think there's, I'm just gonna stop talking about that. I think I said what I need to say. Tic Tacs asks, just got back from the bar in Boston, had a great day meeting up with other type 1s, hopefully celebrating World Diabetes Day. I would love for you to be in the documentary. Let's talk about that after. Right now, it's the documentary project that I'm shooting. It's episodic. So I kind of shoot a bunch, and then I edit for a few months, and I go back out and shoot a bunch. So I think it would be awesome to have you, and frankly, anybody who wants to be in the documentary who has any experience with, the whole struggle of affording insulin. Type 1 or type 2, these are all stories that I think could be included and are important. Tiff says, I think the Cine and stills versions are about the same size for reference, meaning the Rokinon or Samyang 12mm f2 lens, and they are actually quite small. Thank you for putting that in there. Already said hi to QAne, good to see you here. Tiff says that the stills version of that Rokinon 12mm lens has a little distortion. Very interesting. I did not know that. Yes, QAne, lots of live streams lately, and the basic reason I've been threatening to do more live streams, but I wanted to upload 2 videos a week. Didn't really happen the way that I wanted it to, because I'm in nursing school and have a family and working on documentary projects, and am also teaching and on top of being in school. So rather than kind of let the channel die off, what I'm doing is doing live streams, because that's fun for me and it gives me a chance to keep up with those of you all who are the core audience of the channel, and kind of getting out there and talking to people about the XE3 has brought a handful of new folks around, which is really exciting too. So it's good things happening. Once I have time, I'm going to be editing more and putting, continuing to upload, but right now I'm taking what I can get with the live streams, because obviously no editing makes this real easy to do. Ryan Tanaka, good to have you here from LA. Go ahead, make dinner. Yes, hopefully you're still on, and I'm loving having you on here too. And yeah, a handful of you all that I'm friends with on Instagram and Facebook, or well, some of you on Facebook as well, but a handful of you all I'm friends with on Instagram and Twitter as well. And it's so nice to kind of have like that full circle connection where you can hang out and talk to people on different platforms and have a little bit different type of interaction. Eddie says, I find I pick cameras and lens to match my camping. If it's a longer hike or winter summit camp, I have to be more selective. If it's it's an easy chilled out camp, I take a lot of gear. Yes, 100% agree with that. And usually I do that to a fault where I'm just like, oh man, I should not have taken that much. Yeah, the trip is not always as interesting, but thank you. And I appreciate that you, I appreciate that very, very kind words about my foray into documentary filmmaking, and hopefully to make more of those. I have so many that are shot that I have to edit now. It's just like, gotta get after it. QAN says, I went on a trip to Port Royal, shared a camera with someone. The constant hurry to give back the camera, then the other person taking a while to give back, barely got any shots. To hear that. Hopefully you got some good shots out of that trip, if nothing else. Yeah, having to share a camera and pass it back and forth can make the whole creative process really challenging. Although one thing that I have tried to do on numerous occasions where I find myself with a camera but unable to use it, sometimes it's because I'm sharing, other times it's because I forget a battery. Yes, I will look for that on Instagram, and QA, if you want to throw your Instagram handle on here for the rest of the folks too, you can do that. It would be cool to see what you're shooting, or what you shot, I should say. But one of the things that I have done is just kind of go with camera but no memory card, or a camera but no battery, and usually that is an accident when I do that. But I found that when I have a camera and I have no ability to use that camera, that it allows me to actually think photographically but without taking pictures, and it's kind of it's a weird exercise. I don't know how else to explain it. It's a weird exercise that gets me thinking photographically but forces me to not focus on taking those pictures, but rather focus on seeing things that would make worthwhile pictures, like scouting. Yeah, I don't, Eddie says I don't like others using my camera. 100% agree with that. My daughter was using, my 3-year-old daughter, Lilo, she was using my XE3, and I almost had a heart attack when I turned around and I saw that she picked it up, and it was kind of like one of those weird moments, because it's like, do I yell at her and take it away from it? Which was my first reaction, being perfectly candid. I'm human. And I didn't. I was like, okay, just be really careful with that. And then my wife kind of took over and instructed her, kind of helped her find the button, and it was like, okay, you take pictures with this. And the funny thing is, like, my daughter has big hands for a little kid, but she was able to hold this comfortably and to operate it, and she was able to take some pictures of me with it, and super. I will treasure forever that moment, and I will hopefully forever have those pictures of that moment, because that just really brought everything home to me. Why we do what we do with the cameras is to be able to have those kind of moments with each other in places that we care about, and that's incredibly valuable. And as much as all the talk about gear is kind of silly, to a certain extent, it brings us into these situations where we have the opportunity to really look at our story as a thing, as something that we have a say in, as something that we have control over or participation in, and looking at one's own story as something that you have an active role in creating is something that I think, honestly, without trying to be too touchy-feely, I think that it's something that's desperately lacking these days in our society, because a lot of people look at things that happen to them as something that happens to them without any involvement or participation on their side, because they can't control one thing in their life. They just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, I can't control anything, everything's out of my hands, it's all unfair, I'm just going to give up and go be a nihilist and play video games and just hate the world and hate life. But the reality is that for everything that we can't control, there's always our multiplicity of responses that we can control, and that's one of the lessons in metaphysical or philosophical lessons that I have applied to photography, that I'm hoping are making my my photography get better, maybe, or if nothing else, hopefully make my or become a banker. Yeah, that's kind of the other path. Yeah, when people get really jaded, they either just give up and become nihilists and live in their parents' basements. Although I'm living in my dad's house right now because I'm going back to school to correct some of my indiscretions of my youth. Or the other alternative, like you say, Eddie, is to go and become a banker. Kind of not a lot of middle ground there, but it's not a real pretty picture. But when we recognize the voice that we have in our own life and the ability we have to take a creative role instead of just a passive role, I think it's really powerful. And that's why I say, you take that camera out there and you say, what is it that I want to say, and start doing something that you're willing to defend, or that you're willing to get behind, or that you're curious about, or that you believe in, or what have you. Like, it makes a big difference, and it can change the world. And it's cool that we all have that opportunity, which, we didn't have that all, not that long ago. It was something that you had to ask permission and get exposure and get, there were gatekeepers. Now it's less that way. Christopher Holiday says, my wife asked to use my XT2 for class at school. I offered to buy her an XT20 instead. There has to be a name for that. It's like not regifting. Maybe we can kind of think of like a Larry David-ism or like a Seinfeld-ism for that, because I have definitely done that. Like, my wife wanted to borrow my Nikon D600, and I was like, look, let me buy you the 105mm f2 lens. I will give you the D600, and then I'm going to buy, I think it was the X100T at the time that I got to replace that. But there's always, I'm always like, I don't feel comfortable with anybody else. It's good to know. That makes me feel better to know that not everyone, or that I'm not the only one that feels that selfishly about my camera, where I have a really hard time just being like, yeah, sure, here you can use my camera. I'm always just like, kind of like nervously clutching my pearls and wringing my hands as I'm waiting for them to finish and make sure they don't break it or mess up my settings or like smudge the screen or, get a fingerprint on the lens. Like, and it's funny because sometimes I catch myself doing that when I have to hand my camera over to another person. I'm like, man, I kind of hate myself right now. I'm like being really ridiculous. But at the same time, my camera, it's I kind of, it's a personal thing, right? You don't want to just hand it over to just anybody. Tiff says, I wish I could have followed what I really wanted to do in life, but instead became a government employee. At least I get to retire younger than most and hopefully have a second chance later in life. That's an interesting thing. Tiff, I had this conversation with a friend of mine. Her son is in college and he's really smart and he wants to drop out because he wants to go start a record label, and he's got the world by the tail and he has a lot of good ideas. And I look at it, she asked me to speak to him and kind of try to talk him out of dropping out of school. And I don't think I was able to do that at all, because in a lot of ways I identified with what he was saying and where he was coming from. And I think that there's a lot of, it's one way or the other. You pay me now or you pay me later. There's no free lunch. And I think that for the vast majority of people, it's a matter of indecision, where a lot of people can't decide what they want to do, whether they want to pay me now or pay me later. I mean, I said, I'll pay you later. I'm going to go out and live the dream. And I did that for about 10 years. And now it's kind of at a point where, doing a similar type of thing. But there are always workarounds to everything. And a lot of times what we look at or we think of as being a dream job, or even with photography, I mean, guys like Ansel Adams, it took them a while and a lot of effort and side hustling to be able to get, and also lucky connections and people who just happen to like them, and to get to the point where they do what they do or did what they did, right? So I think it's to have a plan and to not lose sight of what ultimately you're after. There's no, one of the things I've definitely learned anyways for myself is that there was a time when I felt like everybody can go out and just throw caution to the wind and go live on the road and be like a crazy adventurer and have their life, and like, you know, not everybody can. And there are certain times when you can, and you got to take advantage of that time. And if it's an option, do it to the fullest, because when it's not an option, well, you want to have the ability to take advantage of that. And there are definite advantages and benefits of having security of, you know, that 9 to 5 government job or wherever it is, you know. So, you know, and one of the things that's really inspiring to me, Tiff, is seeing somebody like yourself who has this kind of, who's able to maintain that duality effectively, to where you have that, you know, very kind of 9 to 5 thing that you're doing, but you haven't let that crush the soul of your dreams and what it is that you want individually out of life. And to be able to maintain, you know, doing what you have to do in the short term to get to where you want to be in the long term, even if that's a really long game that you're playing, that's super inspiring, and that's very thoughtful, and that's a lot harder to do than somebody just being like, the hell with it, I'm going to go do this one thing, and then, you know, a year and a half later be like, ooh, you know, can't pay, you know, can't pay my bills or whatever. So, and I always feel the same way about athletes that are older. You know, like when I look at climbers that are climbing hard in their 60s, I'm way more impressive I think that's way more impressive than like a 20-year-old who can climb like, you know, 2 grades harder. But it's like, yeah, will you be able to do that when you're 60? That takes planning and thoughtfulness, and that's the thing that I find really inspiring. And I'm trying to do a little bit of that myself, both by climbing when I'm an old geezer and also, you know, from a job perspective now too. So I've taken a lot of inspiration from what you've done, Tiff. And I think that that's something that could be a really interesting perspective to share with the world. You know, I'm always trying to push you into blogging and vlogging and, you know, kind of getting out there, because I think that what you have, even though you're very quiet and soft-spoken, I think that sort of perspective is so useful in a world where everybody is just, you know, trying to be heard and be loud and obnoxious. Your perspective is one that's, I think, is very, very valuable, and that is largely missing. So start your YouTube channel. Take all that cine gear and turn it around so it's facing you, and then be like, I'm Tiff, this is my YouTube channel, this is what I'm going to talk about, and like crack an egg of knowledge on everybody, because honestly, people really need it. People really, really need it. Okay. QAnon says Black Friday and Cyber Monday rapidly approaching. Start saving for that gear. Yes, I will be doing that, and I actually will be focusing on buying gear before that so that I can get the videos out there, hopefully in time to cash in on the YouTube bonanza that undoubtedly will follow. As I know that doesn't sound very philosophical and warm and fuzzy of me, but just being honest, I want to, you know, get people stoked on this channel, and this is always a good way to do that. John T asks, how do you store your camera when you're traveling? Do you use a specific bag? Also, thanks for sharing your story. Really awesome work. Thank you, John. When I am traveling, I typically use the, what the hell is the name? Peak Design. I got the Peak Design Messenger bag, the one for the 15-inch laptop. You know, as far as most things go, when I bought it, I was a little bit kind of skeptical of it at first. The ability to swap the dividers, the fact that it pretty much stands up on its own, and it does stand up if you have some cameras in it and you can like set it down. It's very easy to carry, very easy to use. It is not cheap, but it is reasonably weatherproof, dustproof, all that stuff. The Peak Designs, they make an expensive product, but if you're going to be traveling a lot with your camera, you know, like just domestic or you know, flying around traveling, and when I go back to visit my family every weekend, that's the one bag. It's like I can shoot, edit, and do pretty much everything else that I need to do very easily within that one bag. And I would recommend getting the larger bag, like the 15-inch instead of the 13-inch. Just, you know, it fits, it's kind of snug. The zippers on the Peak Design bags are, from my experience so far, I would say bomb-proof. I've packed a lot of stuff into those bags a lot of times, and they have not let me down so far. Knock on wood that continues. to be the case. And I also have the little field pouch and stuff that I keep my Sony RX100 in. And perhaps when I get a pancake lens for ye olde XE3, I'm going to put that in that little pouch as well. That will be really cool to have an X series camera that will fit in the messenger pouch, or the field pouch instead of the messenger bag. But the messenger bag is what I use. I want to, in one of my upcoming videos, I'm going to touch on weather sealing a little bit for cameras, because it is something that I always complain about. I would love to see weather sealing on more of the lower end bodies. I don't think it should be such a high end feature. But the other side of that is that the reality is that weather sealing is mostly psychological in its benefit, because most of the time weather sealing can be accomplished just with the use of a dry bag. So when I was guiding canyons in Utah, we would take people like on swims through slot canyons, and we would put all their earthly valuable electronic goods in a little dry bag and then put that in their backpack. Everything would get wet, but the dry bag is dry. And you just roll it up in there and you put it in there. And for weather sealing or dust protection or anything like that, I always carry one of those with me, so that if I'm out shooting or something like that and it starts to dump, then I have that. I can just stuff the camera in there, roll it up, put it in my backpack or wherever, and then I'm good to go. But frankly, the same thing could be accomplished probably with almost as much reliability if you just had like a plastic bag, like a shopping bag. But yeah, that's what I use to carry my camera when I'm traveling. Usually that bag, because I can get my laptop, my lenses, my camera, and then have a little room left over if I need to put some snacks or some food in there, maybe a book or three, some journals, a couple of hard drives I always have in there, maybe some audio equipment, a little tripod that I kind of slip underneath, some business cards. Those are and an intervalometer or a shutter release cable too. Those are things that I always tend to travel with, and I can get all those things into the Peak Design bag and still be able to carry it reasonably comfortably. Gets on as like my carry-on on a plane. And then I still have, the personal item that I can throw a few pair of underwear and socks and, shirts and shorts or whatever, stuff all that stuff in there, throw my insulin on top, and, basically I have no checked baggage, and I can go pretty much anywhere for like a week. That has been, assuming that I'm not climbing. If I'm doing climbing, then I have to check my climbing gear, because it's just, obviously, unless somebody else has all the ropes and the climbing gear and stuff, then I'll just bring my harness and shoes, and I can make that fit. But that's my general strategy with that. I don't know if that helped or answered anything, but that's kind of where I start from, anyways. QAin says also lens fungus season. Yes, that's a good point. Let the lenses dry out in the sun for sure. Yeah, I do just carry a big bag most of the time, and that simplifies a lot of that. Eddie asked, what one photography have you seen that do you wish you had taken? Okay, so I'm not sure if you mean what one photograph I wish I had taken, or what. I'm not sure where you're going with that question, Eddie. If you clarify, I'd be happy to answer. Oh, what photo have I seen that I wish I had taken? That's a good question. Every time I leave my camera home, almost invariably, I see a photo and I'm like, oh man, why did I leave my camera home? And then I remember it's because like I would never get to class on time if I had, so it's very challenging making those kind of decisions and saying, you know what, right now I'm going to, put photography here when I can concentrate on it and really give it all of my effort. And then there are two different approaches, right? Like you can say, I'm going to have my camera everywhere and I'm going to kind of be half shooting no matter where I am and what I'm doing. And there's some benefit to that, because you're able to capture moments because you always have your camera with you, but you may not be present in those moments and enjoying those moments because you're always shooting, and the quality of your photos might always be a little rushed and snapshot-y. Then the other approach is to say, I'm going to just leave my camera out of the picture because I want to really, this moment is for me and my family. We're going to enjoy this moment. I'm going to be fully present here. And then when this is done, when we're in the next part of the day or the next part of whatever our time together, I'm going to have the camera out and I'm going to be like full on, like, okay, give me your attention. I want to take some photos or what have you. And you kind of can divide it up a little bit. And I've been trying to do that second thing more. But there are also times when, you kind of, my natural tendency is just to have the camera and be always shooting as much as possible, but I also try to be considerate of my impact on other people, and like, now teaching and being involved in schooling, I have to be aware of my impact on other folks too, so there's that. But in terms of photos I wish I had taken, I think there have been a couple, and I can't pinpoint the specific photo, but there was a handful of times where I think it's happened a lot of times while I've been driving, especially when I'm driving across the country. I'll see something, and a lot of times I'll be going kind of fast, and it's like, should I stop and get out and take that picture? Most of the time I'm just like, the hell with it, I'm going to keep going. And I think I regret, if there's any pictures I wish I had taken, it's the ones where you're driving and it's just like, it's right there, but at the same time you're driving and you don't want to be starting and stopping all the time. And, some of the times I did go and take those pictures, but then some of the times, a lot of the times, more often than not, really, I didn't, because it's just like, I'm driving, I just want to get where I'm going, and the faster you're going, the harder it is to slow down with anything. And so those are definitely instances where I feel like I could have, I wish I had put a little more into it. But at the same time, those have also in turn taught me an important lesson moving forward, because it's like, most things that happen, they're going to happen again in one form or another down the road, and it's just a matter of learning from the shots you don't get to not make that same mistake the next time, and then being ready, Ryan says they say regret is often the things you don't do versus the things that you have done, and I think that is very true. And although, just to play devil's advocate, there are certain things that you do that you can't undo, that can create situations of things that you can no longer do because you did that one thing, not wanting to have any regret, if that makes any sense. I mean, the obvious situation is like relationship stuff, where it's like, oh, I have this chance to hook up with this person and I may never have that chance again. I don't want to regret it, so I'm gonna go hook up with them. And then it's like, oh yeah, then like your family is ruined because of that. And I mean, that's an obvious kind of a gimme example, but I think there are probably other things too, where you have to weigh the risk versus the reward. Kids too, yeah, there's that. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so that's what I got for you guys this evening. If anybody has any remaining questions here in the last minute or two, I'll answer some questions kind of rapid fire, because I would like to wind this live stream down. May do another one tonight, may do another one Thursday. Actually, no, scratch that. Tomorrow. No, QAnon. That is not my confession. I can tell you that I am far from, speaking of confessions, I am far from being a perfect person. And I have toyed with very bad decisions, much more so than I ever should have. But I can tell you that it's that knowledge of how hard it is to undo things that seem like a good idea in the moment, and kind of really playing the scenario all the way through and saying, okay, how am I going to deal with this a year from now when I know what the repercussions are going to be, that have always led me to limit my bad decisions to not becoming awful decisions, I guess you could say. That's as, and I think that that's something that, yeah, that's a tough one, but being perfectly honest, like nobody is perfect, and I certainly least of all have any moral high ground to stand on. But I would say that I made some mistakes of that nature when I was much younger, like when I was in college, and I kind of learned my lesson from that, and it was like, okay, that's a mistake that, in the moment you think to yourself and you're like, oh yeah, I can fix that, it'll be okay, I'm just going to kind of get what I want over here, and then we'll find a way to patch back up over there, and give it a little bit of time, and I just got to wait it out. No, just terrible idea, terrible risk management, just so ineffective. So that's been a lesson that I have learned once, and I've learned it thoroughly, and that's, you know, not a lesson that I ever want to have to deal with again. I know it was a joke, I know. But at the same time, it's something that I feel like is relevant to a lot of people, because not everybody has, you know, has a Fuji XE3 and a pancake lens, right? But everybody has relationships in their life, and everybody has decisions to make, and I think that one of the things I will always take the opportunity to have serious philosophical conversations, even if you just mean it as a joke, because that's just who I am. It's what I do. I'm not fun, but and I'm not funny, at least not intentionally, except for the fact that I'm not funny is funny by accident sometimes. Eddie says, a fool can ask more questions than a wise man can ever answer. Eddie, I love your little proverbs. I'm assuming they're Scottish proverbs because you're from Scotland. I always appreciate your little one-liners. Big fan of those as well. That's what makes this that's what makes these live streams so fun, is because I'm here getting all deep and philosophical and taking everything to heart, and then Eddie's cracking wise, and we have you know, people chiming in, trolls and stuff like that too. It's a great time. It's a great community that we have here. So wrapping up this live stream, if you aren't already subscribed to this channel, I would love it if you did subscribe. We do these live streams all the time. I'm happy to answer questions about the XE3 or anything photography, filmmaking that I possibly can help with the GH5 camera wise, and the little bit that I know about audio. If you want to support the work that I'm doing here on this channel, use the Amazon links that will be posted down below after the stream is concluded, or that are in any of the videos, because that does help me keep these lights on, keep the cameras rolling, and be able to make more videos for you guys. I'm very, very excited about the videos coming up here where we're going to really dig into the XE3, and I'm also excited about the documentaries that I'm working on that are also going to be coming out here. And I'm very excited about how this little guy is going to fit into my documentary photography, because it's so tiny and portable and just very agile. So yeah, and those of you who are supporting the Living Vertical movement on Patreon, thank you guys and gals so much, because you guys literally are the most direct line of support that I have for everything that I do, and you enable me to make these videos, enable me to work on documentary projects, and you know, be able to have this platform to help, you know, encourage people in their creative pursuits, encourage people to really have fun with the camera and tell their story at the same time. So any questions, any comments, drop them down below. I've really enjoyed this time with you guys tonight, and I will see you Thursday, maybe Thursday or Friday, definitely Friday, maybe Thursday, for a live stream again, probably around 8 or so Eastern, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe 9 actually on Thursday. Yeah, let's say 9 on Thursday. Let's do that. See you guys then. Good chatting with you. Catch you on the next episode.